Welcome to Single Parent Success Stories, a podcast designed to inspire single parents. Here you'll find resources from self-care to finances to parenting and everything in between. Discover what it takes to thrive. Let the stories inspire you to what is possible. Hello and welcome to Single Parent Success Stories. Today's guest is Buescher. He is on a journey to discover what it means to live a life of purpose. His journey is one of transformation from a rational thinker trying to make sense of things to an intuitive soul at peace with the life around him. Steve is a writer, podcaster, and founded the Global Summit event community. He is also a single dad of one daughter. Welcome, Steven. It is a pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you so much, Irina. My daughter is grown, but throughout my life, I was in that single parenting role, and there's these challenges that we face. So we don't always end up into that space willingly. Sometimes that it can surprise you out of the blue. And what I found in life is that this journey that we're on, it's about turning that reflection inward, and it's learning about ourselves in this process. For so many years, being a rational thinker, I was trying to make sense of life. I was trying to make sense of the actions of others. And what I realized is sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense is just wasting your energy, and it's wasting your brain power. And you end up in this life of being exhausted, always doubting yourself and never really trusting yourself. So what I've done through life is I realized, if you're in that space, sometimes you can end up with partners that are just not the most beneficial, not only for yourself, but for your children. And what I've realized is if we turn that reflection inward, if we build up that trust, that will help with life. Because so often as a single parent, you're looking for someone to give you reflection back of saying, yes, this is good, or you're doing the right thing, because children are challenges. I mean, they will challenge us on the emotional scale of everything that we do. And that's their job. They operate in this emotional space. And if we're not strong in how we are, and not being strong as being dictatorial, but being strong in being okay with being challenged and being okay with how we address things, it can be really difficult. So that's been my journey, is to going from this place of not having that strength of knowing, yes, this is who I am, this is what I believe, this is how I want life to be, to moving into a space where you become curious and you see what it is that you see. It's almost as though I brought in the spiritual side of my life. It's almost as though you actually bring in that leadership and that strength of being. So I had to take from, my thoughts, trying to make sense of everything. I had to just kind of set that off to the side, and I had to bring in that positivity, that spiritual side, the higher self or God. And when I did that, it shifted the way that I processed and experienced life.
Yeah, because we are creators of our experience.
We are, and there was a great sense of peace that came in, which surprised me. I really thought that when I had this, and these shifts usually come from emotional strain or emotional trauma. You're under a tremendous amount of stress, whether it be through work or through your children or life, and you have to make a choice. And this is where I realized that choice has a huge impact on how we turn up in life and how we experience life. So it's knowing what you want, and it's making intentional choices towards how you feel, how you raise your children, and how you show up in life.
So right. And just a little bit, how did you become a single parent? Was this an active decision, or was it an accident? What happened? And feel free to share as much or as little as you feel.
So in my 20s, we get attached to people that that we really care about, and so a lot of times there's heightened emotions and everything that go along with that. But sometimes we don't know the person that we are with, and so my partner, uh, we had a child, and we got married, and then in the next over the next 3 years, it was just evident that it wasn't meant to be. And I don't know if anyone has gotten married where they had reservations already, but over the next 3 years, there was just confirmation of those reservations, and there was things going on that were chemistry based, physical chemistry based problems. But there's all of these challenges that come in with emotional regulation in the way that people view things, and so when you're with somebody, this is the most amazing time for self-awareness and self-reflection. And it's also the most difficult time for being, because you're being challenged on the very core values of what you believe. So what happened was, I got married, and most of that was based off of, you know, some of the religious teachings I had when I was younger about raising a child, and having the most optimistic view of what could be with creating a family and everything else. But I was quite low in my emotional intelligence. So I didn't know how to argue. I didn't know how to, I was quite sensitive. There was just so many things that I brought into the relationship that were not healthy. And then my partner had the same, right? The trauma from childhood, alcoholism within the family. There were issues with sense of security, low emotional cue there as well, and just overall challenges to having a really positive, healthy relationship. And when you have a child, then that gets exacerbated, because there is heightened emotion, or heightened hormones, heightened emotions, and heightened expectations. So after 3 years, we did get divorced, and it was quite difficult, right? When you're a single parent, and divorce tends to have really deep financial implications. It has deep emotional implications, and it leaves you in this space of re-questioning, everything. And so that's where I was as I was looking at life, and it took me close to 40 years to really get it, to understand what it was that should have been, and the life journey, and the challenges that we face, that really is a positive space. That it hurts at the time, it's really difficult at the time, but that's where we get the most growth. And even my family tried to put me in the space of being angry, but I avoided that space of anger. I would actually shut down rather than become angry, because I didn't like that feeling. And I realize now that it's okay to be angry, and that is, in some cases, not physical anger where you're beating on somebody and things like that. What I'm saying is to have a boundary, and to say, this is not okay, and I am worth more, and to question that. If you're putting up with someone not treating you well, it's wondering, why are you doing that? Why are you letting someone treat you that way? Or more importantly, why are you feeling that way? What we have within our mental space is we've got all of these role identities, and we will let somebody treat us a certain way because they're the father of our child or the mother of our child, whether they're a husband or a wife, whether they're a mother or a father. We have all of these ideas of what people are and how they should act. But people don't act that way. Everyone has their different identity of who they are in that role. And what we have the capability of doing is challenging what we believe about each one of those roles at any time. So when we're acting as the mother of a child or a father of a child, we will act differently than we're acting as a friend, or acting as an employee. So it's balancing what it is that we believe to be true, and then really stepping back and questioning those beliefs in a way that can be the best, not only for ourselves, but for the child. And I think, we talk about self-care and things like that a lot within the group that I'm involved with, the Global Summit events and the Better Life series. it's so critical because the kids learn more from modeling, especially when they're young, than they ever will by um, what we say to them.
You're right. You're right. Doesn't matter what we say, it's more what we do. So, what helped you overcome your struggles?
So time was the biggest thing, and I struggled my entire parenting life. I mean, I I never really understood that it's by having that inner strength is the best way that you can forge those bonds. There's a few things that are expectations, like especially if you're sensitive, it's knowing what you want and it's placing that expectation. But it's a challenge because if you're trying to set up a good dialogue or a good interaction with your child, it's knowing how to manage that in a constructive way. So what I'm saying is, like, if you're trying to establish communication, establish those phone calls early, especially if you're doing co-parenting where your child is going to another space. It's when they're young, it's establishing those regular phone calls where you have a schedule, you keep to the schedule, and you build into that child a habit of communication. Because there will be a time when they're seeking their independence and they're finding who they are, that they will rebel against that a little bit. But if you have that core training built in, then they'll come back to that at some point. And the biggest thing is about being curious. It's letting them discover on their own what it is that they're there to discover. It allowing them to make mistakes, but celebrating those mistakes as a triumph. So it's teaching them how to face a mistake or face a challenge and not criticize them for it or not, not make it too extreme, but to turn it into a problem solving opportunity that, okay, you made a mistake. How can we, or how can you um, change this into a different outcome? And I think if you can teach your child that, it's amazing. There was a story that happened, and this story was about it's with one of my friends, Stuart Elliott, and he was talking about his daughter, and he's become a parent quite later on in age, and his daughter came up and she was just upset because she was drawing a picture. Her sister bumped her arm, and now her strawberry in her cake or now this thing on the cake was a line, and she was really upset about it, and it could have turned into something quite, you know, dividing where, oh, the sister did this, that was wrong of the sister, I'm going to go talk to the sister and all this. But the father, he was making the dinner, and he goes, well, I wonder if that could be a strawberry. And she went on and disappeared for a little while and then came back later on. And not only was there one strawberry that was on the top of this cake, but two. And she was really proud of it. The most important thing was, a couple of weeks later, she had come back from an art class and she had made a mistake. She picked the wrong color or something happened. And all of a sudden, in the middle of her painting was this error where she would have been upset earlier. She spent the next 15 minutes telling her dad how she fixed that mistake. And it was such a beautiful story. She was so excited that she was able to fix that problem. And I think that that's something that we forget about, is we're so busy trying to protect our children and trying to keep them from making mistakes that we forget that overcoming those mistakes are some of the most beautiful times that we can have in this life.
You're right, because in our capacity of being overprotective and making sure nothing bad happens, we sometimes cross over the boundary and give the solution instead of letting the child arrive there on their own, maybe guiding them along a little bit. So speaking of that, what do you think is the most important trait to instill in a child?
So I think it's that. So we have to go back to our core value, right? So the most important trait is going to be what this child brings to this world, right? They will have their own important trait. But I do believe that it's self-acceptance. There's a couple of things that we talk about and with the Wellness Wednesday program, which is an offshoot of the Global Summit events. Every Wednesday we talk about mental wellness and different things that come up. We had a discussion about how to raise a happy child. And so within that discussion, we kind of dive deep and we look at, okay, what can what do people believe? What have people experienced? How can we use this information to grow from it? If I were to take one concept and bring that forward and say, okay, this is going to raise a happy child, which is what we're all after. It's to help them find a sense of gratitude and this emotional sense of self where they're not little tyrants. They're not comparing themselves to other, but they're comparing themselves to themselves the previous day. So it's working with them constantly to make this growth mindset, which is you're not a smart person, you're not a smart boy, or you're not a smart girl. You do this quite well. You are, very good at studying, or but through effort and through work, you get better at everything that you do. And there is a challenge there because there are levels of hierarchy where not everyone's going to be a star singer, a star football player, but teaching them to know, okay, this is what you love to do, and how can you become better at that? How much training, how much do you want to do to experience what it is that you experience? And I think if you do that, I think the child will be quite, they will learn that they can do anything, but is it something that they want to do?
Yeah, so how do you discover something that they want to do? Do you encourage them if you see a natural talent? Do you push them in that direction, or do you just let them explore on their own?
So that's a challenge because we are inherently lazy creatures.
Exactly.
And but at the same time, we don't want to we don't want to make this a miserable life. And so if again, it goes back to that training. If you can, and so many of the parents that I have, they put pressure on their children to be involved in activities that will make them social, in activities that will help them become stronger or smarter, or all of these different things. And if there's a balance there, it's really good. But you're going to get natural resistance. Like there's there's six personality traits. So you have, and they go by ocean. These are psychological personality traits. It's ocean: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, and the opposite of that being introversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Neuroticism is how emotional you are. And the sixth one that's been added to that is how honest you are. And every one of those is a personality trait that if you test and someone measures on the scale from like agreeable to whatever the opposite of that is, not agreeable, you will find a way that they'll kind of end up in life. So it's a good predictor. And there's so much that goes in with knowing the mindset and how to deal with somebody. When somebody's highly agreeable, then you could just ask them to do something and they will tend to do it. If they're on the opposite side, this is where that reverse psychology comes into play, right? So if they're the opposite, you tell them the opposite and they will do the opposite, right? Right. So and it all works out. It's okay. It's being creative as a parent to try to figure out, okay, what kind of child do you have? But I do think that a structure is really good, because for the people that stick with it and the people that are supported, then the child's going to learn a skill or some habits that will be helpful in the future. I would let your listeners give advice on that, because I don't have the ultimate advice in that area. But I do think it's important to have that structure and at least get them to do something that that they seem to enjoy. You don't want to force them into doing something that they hate doing.
Right. Well, I have a dilemma to face, because I see my son's natural ability to dance, and I see how great he is at that. But he decided to retire at ripe age of 8, because it's been already 4 years that he's been doing that. So I gotta find something else for him to pursue.
Mm. And so what is your answer to that? I mean, what is it that what kind of discussions do you have with your son when it comes to what he likes to do, or where he spends his time?
I guess it changes with seasons, and as you said, we are all inherently lazy, so playing video games is always great.
Well, it's hard, and because you're dealing with such an addictive um, source there, right? So you have tremendous amount of flashing lights and audio signals, and they've brought in psychologists to help gamify these video games, and that's the same technology that's gone into gambling. So they know how to trigger within our minds this dopamine response where we get pleasure from playing the game, from rewards, and it's tied into our biology. And this is a challenge because we do have this biological side with our being, and we also have this consciousness that can override that biology to a level. If we can if we can do that, it makes a huge difference. One of the things that I would do, and especially it goes along with punishment, right? So when you have punishment and rewards, the what I did is, for a young lady that I was dating, she was a single mother. With the child, we brought in two jars, and one jar was a punishment jar, and one jar was a reward jar, and we let him pick all of the punishments that he wanted to put in the jar. So he picked things like screen time. Um, he tried to put a few things that were more rewards in the jar as well. But what would happen is when there was a boundary crossed, and we had to make sure that you couldn't punish until there was clear communication that this is a boundary and a willing violation of that boundary, then he would go draw from the jar. And it's like it almost became something that it's like, he realized later on that you can't be too strict on the punishments. Like when he first was doing the punishments, he was a little extreme in what he was going to punish himself as. I can't remember some of the grounding for a month, I think was one. And but then the reward jar was everybody got to put into the reward jar, everybody in the family. So he would put in he actually put in alone time, or he put in screen time, 1 hour or 2 hours. And then the parents would put things in like, pick a movie. It's like pick a movie, Irina pick, and then pick a movie your son pick. And and my partner put in dance, right? So she wanted to dance with the family, and we would do that. We would dance for 20 minutes. And boy, that was kind of punishment for me because, I was, you have to get over yourself, right? You have to, and I love doing that. I love dancing anyways, but it, it's a little silly when you have your 10-year-old in there, in the mix and everything else kind of, pointing out your awkwardness. But it's fun. It's a fun experience for the family, and we were laughing. We'd laugh so hard that our cheeks would hurt. And to me, that's kind of a beautiful bonding experience.
I love that experience, and you kind of let the child pick, the punishments, the rewards. I think that's amazing.
It throws in that variability, because this is the thing that I think is helpful. We want to offload some of that doubt, and when you've gone through and established that, okay, this is how we're going to handle things, our emotions move through these cycles. And if we have this routine established that we know how we're going to handle that, it takes away the frustration. My daughter was so willful. I mean, absolutely willful. I read a parenting book when I was younger, and so she was so strong-willed. I mean, she would take her an hour to get ready for school. You would dress her, she would take her clothes off. She'd want to go in the strangest clothes. I mean, it's like, and she was little at the time, but she had a sense of I am that was so strong. And you can't break that out of a child. They will be that willful the entire life, and she remains so. She's a quite successful business owner now, and that everything that I saw as a challenge, and you've got to break this, otherwise you're not going to be successful in life, um, allowed her to be successful. But she was not successful in the corporate environment. She had to start her own business. So, that was a challenge, because I actually sat her down when she was in college and said, she was not going to school. She was not taking her classes. And I said, why are you going to school? And for the first answer was, well, I'm going because you want me to go. And then the second one was, a teacher told her to go. we went through this whole spectrum of answers, and finally she said, well, she wanted to make bank. She wanted to make, a lot of money. And I finally felt like that was a real answer, that was her reason for going. And when she told me that, I said, okay, good. Now we can figure out how to make the most amount of money that you can from going to college. And I told her, you need to have at least a B average. You want that first good job, and your grade point will get you into this space of being accepted for interviews, and then you can use your personality to sell it from there. But then I said, what is the challenge to that? Why aren't you doing your work? And she said, well, I don't like people telling me what to do. And I said, that's going to be a problem because, I said, to make the money that you want to make, you have to suck it up a little bit. And for the first 7 or 8 years, really learn and listen to people, and then become your own boss, right? You can move up into the management, and then you can go from there. And what I found is, I said, the other option is that you can start your own business. And I gave her, all the people that didn't finish college that started businesses. And it doesn't matter what age you're in as well. I mean, people have been successful that started their businesses in 60s, 70s, and 80s. So it doesn't matter where you're at in life. What matters is you have something that you love to do. And for her, I said, if you become a business owner, I said that you have all of your customers to please, rather than, one person to listen to. You'll be listening to everyone. And that is the path that she took. And we'd have all these fights about money and everything else. And when she was around 21, she came to me and she goes, Dad, I've paid off all my bills, and I've got $100,000 in the bank. And I thought, what? How do you do that? And I knew she did it because she was a very, very bright child. But what was curious about that was I was wondering, is she done now? Because she achieved a milestone and a goal that most people don't achieve. And she said, no, not until I hit 1 million. So she had already set her high financial quotient, which was much higher than most people, and use that to move forward. So the reason behind this story is that all of the things that I tried to argue out of her, the screen time, the friends on Facebook, going to class, everything else, she actually did the opposite and was far more successful than if she would have followed my advice. So it's hard to say that we don't know what we don't know. But I think as a single parent, if we can bring it back to the space of just loving your child, right? Being there for them, trying to get a sense of emotional regulation in ourselves, to teach them high levels of emotional intelligence, and what that means is, if for people that don't know what the emotional intelligence is we've got emotions. That's that human experience of how we feel and how we process, along with our cognitive, rational thinking side. And then the emotional intelligence is understanding what it is that we're feeling. It's bringing it into kind of a cognitive space where we're mixing a little bit of that rational side to what it is that we're experiencing. And then the third one is emotional resilience. So things happen in life that cause us hurt. They cause us strain. They cause our emotions to flex and to bend. If we're rigid, if we expect things to be a certain way, we'll break because we don't have that flexibility. The emotion will move through. I always say it's like a wave. If you don't flow with the energy, if you resist what you are experiencing, then it will come through. And the more resistance you give, that energy is what you feel. So it'll actually become stronger than what you experienced. And that can cause extreme stress on people. If you allow that to move through and kind of flex with it and learn from it, it changes everything. And I always do a mindfulness technique. If somebody's struggling with that, it's to become self-aware. The first thing we can do is become aware of our emotions. And if we do that, instead of asking externally what caused this, why am I feeling this way? Why did you do that? Ask yourself, what am I feeling? What is it that I am feeling in this moment? And it's not judging it. It's not giving a reason behind it, but noticing, okay, if I'm carrying stress, am I carrying it in my neck? Am I carrying it in my back? Is it in my hips? Right? Where am I feeling this feeling? And as you go and start noticing what you are actually feeling and then focusing on your breath, it'll give that chemistry time to dissipate. And over time, you'll become better at noticing the actual chemistry that's moving into your body when something is triggered. Because many of us are trained to experience this, but we just we're an automatic program. We don't know why we're feeling what we're feeling. And if you start noticing early, then you'll realize that someone will do something, and that thing that they do, and it could be your child, right? It could be an action, a behavior, a word, will trigger this chemistry. And if you catch it early, you'll notice it right away when it's coming in. And then you can become curious. You can understand, why was I triggered in that moment? Why did that cause this chemical response within my body? And then where did that come from? And if you can discover that, then you can step into this path of self-awareness, and you can actually go back to that moment of, do I want to carry this belief with me? Is it something that belongs to me? I have parents that they're going on a trip, right? They're late, and the father went in to get something because he had forgotten it. So now he's all frustrated. Well, the son wanted an umbrella, and so he goes into the house while the father's in getting his billfold, and now the father is like, where's the boy? Where's the kid? And he is just livid now, right? So he goes into this rage mode of being upset, um, screaming at a small child that wanted to get his umbrella because it's a sunny day. There's no chance of rain. But the child is just patterning and mimicking the father, right? He doesn't know any difference between the umbrella and the wallet. And to him, he wanted the umbrella, right? That's something that he'd seen before. And, I don't know. I don't know whether it rained or not, but the whole thing was, the father repeated something. And when he explored it in his mind, his father had done the same thing, right? He remembered a time in the past when his father had gotten upset when they were late and they needed to get something, and he yelled at the father now. So that patterning goes through, and we repeat the patterns of our parents. And if we can break that cycle, we can change how the kids are brought up.
You are so right. We're in this vicious cycle, and it takes awareness to break it and change and do something different about that. What kind of advice would you share for single parents who are just stepping onto the journey of single parenting?
Be okay with yourself, right? This idea of self-care, we so often flex and bend to try to accommodate the child, to try to accommodate the partner. We have all of these role identities. I think the best thing that you can do, especially if there's sadness involved, right? A lot of times when there's a breakup, there's a lot of stress and a lot of sadness. It's being okay with it, and in the way that you manage that, right? So sometimes there can be anger and things like that. It's for the child. The best thing that you can do is to not villainize anyone, even if they are the most toxic type of person. And the reason that is because the child doesn't know any difference. If they're in a relationship, the best thing that you can do is to be your best self, and to do your best to try to model the behavior that you want to model, and to support the child. But they will pick up bad habits. They will pick up modeling from somebody that you feel is toxic. And many times it's just triggering behavior. So they're going to pick up that same triggering behavior, but it's being strong. So often we're people that are sensitive or people that are agreeable are manipulated by those that do that for purpose. That's where that narcissistic personality traits come in. If someone will, they don't care. You can't make them care. They may not care about the child. They may not care about the person. So if somebody has dealt with that, and I'm in the process of finishing my book, Narcissist Proof, and it's not about the narcissist. It's because we can't even say what a narcissist is in my definition, right? There is a diagnosis. I'm not talking about that. I'm using a word that conveys a set of behavior, and it's thrown around so frequently that people don't understand what it is. It's this whole spectrum of who we are and the behaviors. And it goes from self-focus in that bubble of identity goes from, an individual to a family and bigger to, in my opinion, maliciousness, how hurtful a person can be. So the most important thing a single parent can do is to bring that focus internally. And if someone has been with a narcissist, they don't set boundaries. That's one of the things that got them into that situation. It's understanding, what are you willing to be uncomfortable, right? Where are you willing to draw the line? Where are you willing to have conflict and to know that line? And it's hard because many times there's court things going on and everything else when you just get into this single space journey. But it's having that strength that you'll get through it and to have a network of positive people. And I think that's the hardest thing is often people feel like they're in this by themselves. They have no support structure. And the group that I have is the most important thing is connection. People are coming in, they're getting connected. I think if you have that space of positive people that are non-judgmental, then it can help support that. And I know that you have a group as well. And that is what I would recommend is find your tribe, find a space where you can move into being yourself and move away from focusing on what's wrong, the hurt, the negativity, and slowly find your light again. Find that makes you laugh, that makes you smile, and move away from that sadness. And if I could give one bit of advice to someone that's going through this difficult time, it's find something to be grateful for every day. Is find that gratitude, and slowly that will turn into happiness.
You are so right. Thank you. Thank you so much. And finding the light, I think, is very important, because in the midst of despair, we often forget that we have that light, that we have that inner knowing, inner wisdom. And, we'd rather listen to others. And I was, I called in that boat of, I didn't want to deal with conflict. I would choose peaceful existence and avoid conflict at all costs. But on the negative side, then there are no boundaries. The boundaries were often crossed, and we often experience things on a different level. So thank you for making that a notion. If people would love to learn more about you and connect with you further, where would they go?
So I've got a link tree which will show the podcast and the groups that I'm involved with, the books that are coming out, and we can put that into the show notes. It's Linktree. It's linktr.ee, /4 My Best Life, or they can email me at steve@mybest-life.com. It's about this journey. It's what we believe to be true will be true for us. And if we focus on the better, I think that you can have both the most beautiful life and the most painful life coexist, right? And it's where we're putting our focus. And so, yeah, if anyone would like to reach out to me, I'm here.
Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your wisdom. I really loved our conversation, and you hit on very important points, of self-awareness and emotional intelligence, and letting kids kind of discover their gifts, and us being conscious guides.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom. I loved having you.
Oh, thank you so much. And you remember that we don't always have it right. Let your child be your child. And there's this beautiful thing that occurs. Not only is the physical health of your child determined by age 7, the overall longevity of health, which means that to be conscious of feeding them good food, healthy food, right? Trying to minimize the sugar intake, things like that, which is hard for children. Their emotional level of being, right? Their socialization, all of that is really formed by age 7, and our minds operate in a different state of being when we're younger. So as a hypnotherapist, we talk about how you can shift your brain waves, how you're processing things to go into that trance state. Well, your children are in that trance state from 0 to 7 or 8 years old. They don't have that distinction between imaginary and reality. And they are immense learners. They're absorbing everything. They're seeing what they're seeing. They're taking that in. So just be a little bit more graceful with yourself, and realize that we do make mistakes, and that the children make mistakes, but we're on this journey together, and have some fun, laugh along the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Very important to laugh.
Yes.
Thank you so much.